listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Welcome to The Briefing. In an Australian first, 2 social houses have been built not by tradies, but by a 3D printer.
So we set up one day, we're printing for 5 days, and we're packing up the next day.
That deep dive looking into the world of 3D printed homes in Australia is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Thursday, the 29th of May.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting this morning with some politics where there's been a major shake-up on the front bench following the coalition's breakup, then reunion, with some big names dumped, including Jane Hume and Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. The Nationals landed with 6 positions in the end, one less than they'd been hoping for, with the major portfolios going to the Libs.
Yeah, and one of those major shake-ups was Angus Taylor, who ran against Susan Lee as opposition leader. He's been replaced as Shadow Treasurer by newcomer Ted O'Brien. Angus Taylor now taking over the defence portfolio, with the opposition leader saying the demotion isn't a punishment, just a new era that they're entering. The entire reshuffle will see the party break away from its more traditional and conservative stance on some big topics like immigration, women's issues and efficiency.
That's right, and that's because of the fresh faces. That'll include multicultural issues advocate Paul Scar, who's taking over that immigration portfolio, and there's also Julian Leeser, the new Shadow Attorney General. Both are known to be more moderate in their views and an obvious bid to try and modernise the coalition and the public's perception of the Libs following their shocking election result.
To the Middle East, where the new and controversial US and Israel-backed aid distributor says it's temporarily suspending some of its operations after its chaotic attempt to hand out food yesterday. According to Gaza's health ministry, at least 10 Palestinians have been killed and 62 others injured while trying to access aid distributed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, with Israeli forces yesterday opening fire as thousands clamoured over fences to access one of its sites.
The head of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, condemned the American-backed model this morning, saying that the infrastructure to deliver aid to the Strip's 2.1 million residents, 500,000 of which are imminently facing starvation, already exists.
We have seen yesterday the shocking images of hungry people pushing against fences, desperate for food. It was chaotic, undignified and unsafe. I believe it is a waste of resources and a distraction from atrocities.
As all of this was unfolding yesterday and those shocking images and videos started to pour onto socials, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was asked if he would follow the UK, Canada and France in threatening Israel with sanctions. He said Australia makes its own decisions.
What are the sanctions you're suggesting?
I'm not sure.
Exactly. That's the point. You're not sure. And it's not a criticism of you, it's just a reflection of the reality.
Yeah, and his comments there come as former Labor frontbencher Ed Husic has kept pushing for targeted sanctions on key Israeli officials in the IDF and Netanyahu government, all the while the UK has paused its free trade talks with Israel.
Staying overseas, brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate are set to be charged with 21 fresh offences in the UK, including rape, human trafficking and actual bodily harm. Prosecutors confirmed the charges have been authorised and formed part of an extradition warrant issued back in 2024 to bring the pair back to Romania.
The British Americans are under investigation there too and denying a number of other domestic criminal charges like sex with a minor and human trafficking. The prosecutors say those have to be settled first before the UK charges can be dealt with those allegations dating back to 2012 and 2014. Now, 38-year-old Andrew Tate is a self-described misogynist who built a massive online following in the multi-millions, and he and that influence he has had is being largely blamed for a really poor culture that's been brewing among cohorts of some young men, particularly relating to their attitudes towards women. So the Andrew Tate effect, as some experts have labelled it, is something that we saw strongly in the Netflix series Adolescence.
Yeah, now Andrew Tate's facing 10 charges relating to 3 alleged victims, while his brother Tristan is facing 11 charges relating to 1 alleged victim. Both have said they categorically reject all of the charges and claim they are, quote, very innocent men.
Back home now, where more and more Aussies are turning to greener homes to help bring down their energy bills. Domain's Dr. Nicola Powell says buyers are willing to fork out more for them, with Middle Australia driving the uptake.
We found that over half of houses listed for sale had an energy efficient keyword within that listing, and almost over a third of units also had an energy efficient listing, and that's up significantly over the past 5 years.
Yeah, and there's one area that is leading the charge, the ACT, with 72% of houses listed in Canberra advertising energy-saving features.
But as to which state is the most sustainable, that's looking like New South Wales at the moment. New data from comparison website iSelect shows 4 of the top 10 most sustainable cities in Australia are located in the state, mostly based in far north New South Wales.
Yeah, and look, these rankings are based on a bunch of factors like carbon emissions, renewables and clean energy use, solar panel uptake and tree coverage, with Canberra taking out the top spot, being one of the only cities in the world that runs exclusively on renewable energy.
Full time, New South Wales 1-0 over Queensland, and the score is 18-6.
Yes, that's right. Queenslanders are licking their wounds this morning after a massive defeat by the Blues in State of Origin Game 1 in Brisbane last night. They smashed the Maroons back-to-back after defeating Queensland on their home turf in Game 3 last year and then again last night. The first time they've managed to do that in Toad territory in 27 years, Chris.
The win was secured in front of a 52,000-strong crowd, with the series now heading to Perth, then Sydney for Games 2 and 3. Tara, there is something noticeably absent from around your neck today, perhaps a maroon scarf that you were donning yesterday very, very proudly.
Yeah. Still proud Queenslander. I mean, the Blues have got to win sometime. It'd be a boring clash if they didn't. So take your win. We'll be back as always, as we always are. But I don't love that the next game is in Perth, though. I get that we're trying to expand the game, the love of Origin, but literally making it impossible for Queenslanders and New South Welsh men and women to be able to go. Prices to Perth are bloody expensive. Side note, I should mention, our office is at the top of Caxton Street and a mere walking steps to Suncorp Stadium. There were some very stumbly-looking people in some Origin jerseys still on my drive into the office this morning. Obviously had a very fun night.
Yeah, and that fun will continue tonight because the Women's Origin Series is wrapping up tonight in Newcastle. It's Game 3, New South Wales again in a very nice spot. Tara Cassidy looking to claim a whitewash or a clean sweep after winning the first 2 games. So that kicks off tonight. Definitely something to flick on if you are near a telly. That is it for headlines. Up next is my deep dive, looking into the world of 3D printed homes, chatting with someone who's building them at the moment and an expert in the field to figure out whether it's a passing fad or here to stay. That's coming up for you next. 3D printing's come a long way since the 80s, when the very first thing to be successfully printed was a teeny tiny eye wash cup. Back then, it was all about creating something layer by layer, kind of like icing a cake, but with liquid plastic. And that process is pretty much the same 4 decades on. It's just what we're making has completely changed. You can 3D print what feels like just about anything now, from shoes, guns and organs, all the way to homes. That's something the New South Wales government's recently gotten around just this month, completing the country's first ever 3D printed social houses. It involved 70 tonnes of concrete with the main structure printed in less than 20 days, and the entire project delivered within 20 weeks, more than half the usual timeline of new builds, a major milestone in tackling the housing crisis. Nick Holden is the founder and CEO of Contour 3D, who partnered with the state government to deliver these homes, and he's the brains behind the Southern Hemisphere's first ever 3D printed house. Nick, welcome to the briefing. To kick us off, how does one 3D print a home?
So look, a lot of people will be familiar with a standard desktop 3D printer, I suppose, the plastic printers. And essentially, it's oversimplifying it to say it is like a larger version of that. We manufacture our printers in New South Wales. Sort of they go up to 15 metres wide and sort of 30, 40 metres long, and however high that needs to be, 3 to 4 metres. So we set that up on the site. We've got a hell of a lot of tech in that now. So we're on a 4th generation printer. So we've got technology where we're mapping the site, we're referencing the printer, it's measuring weather data. So look, it's very, very clever, and it makes it really simple to operate and simple to produce a very quality product. So we set the printer up on site. We arrive. At the moment there is a concrete slab already down that we have prepared. It takes us around about 4 hours to set the printer up. Once we get to site, plug it all in, reference the printer. We're doing some dry run tests, and then hopefully we're testing in the afternoon. So then the very next day, you're ready to go. You press the green button, and off it goes. And it just moves backwards and forwards, layer by layer by layer by layer.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I've been kind of trying to explain it to people who don't fully understand what it looks like. And I've said, it kind of looks like those car wash machines, the automatic car wash machines that go up. Yeah. It's got 2 stands, it's got this thing, and it just goes around and pours and tracks the perimeter of this structure and just starts pouring out these walls. How quickly can you 3D print a home? You've hinted there a little bit at timeline. How quickly can you get it done?
Yeah, look, depending on the home, we have recently printed Australia's first social house for the New South Wales government in Dubbo. So that was essentially a duplex. I suppose it had 2 dwellings in there, 2 to 3 bedrooms each, a single story, and that was printed in 10 days of actual print time. So, and that was with our sort of Generation 2 machine. So with the new one, we would reduce that to around about 7 days. So we set up one day, we're printing for 5 days, and we're packing up the next day. And what that does is that produces all the external and internal walls for the house, and then that's ready to accept the fit out, the roof system, and whatever else goes on there. It's a very swift process. For that particular operation, we would use 3 to 4 people, and it actually uses our own material, which is our contourcrete. So it's not typical concrete. It's a very special formulation that we've developed.
And then you leave space, obviously, for other tradies to come in and do their thing. So, you have people coming in to do the windows, the roofs, the kitchens and stuff like that. But as to your specific part of the build, how much would that cost someone in the market looking to build a home?
So what we are seeing at the moment when we've taken on builds, and we've done this where we have done the end-to-end build, but we are seeing around about a 25% overall saving on the entire build process. So it is fairly significant. We will reduce that even further as our raw materials, become more recycled. We're at 40% recycled content at the moment, but we're sort of driving that upwards. So that's a very good news story. We're at 60 MPa cure strength. So to put that in layman's terms, it's very, very robust.
Thank you.
It's a very high-performance concrete. That sort of strength is used in high-rise buildings. So normally the concrete slab that you drive your car on in the garage would be about 20 MPa. So this is 3 times the strength of that. So they're very, very, very robust, and very resilient to weathers, to fire, to storm, to floods.
So what I'm hearing is that you're creating structures that are strong, they're efficient, and they're also cheaper. Have you been met with resistance from the construction industry?
I would say initially maybe, a little bit of resistance. But obviously you only hear the wheel that squeaks, right? So I'd say it's probably only a couple of % of the industry, and that was more so from certifiers, engineers. They had valid questions, but as we've sort of gone on and we've got structures on the ground, we've got amenities blocks here, amenities blocks there, and we've done a lot of other things around the country, we build our own momentum and our own credibility. At the end of the day, it's a very high-performance concrete. It's very recycled concrete, but it is still a known quantity, So we're not asking to completely reinvent the wheel. We actually had the National Construction Code and the Building Commission come down while we were printing the job in Cronulla. They want to know, they want to learn, they want to see what's happening in that regard. And all that was super positive, So it's something has to happen. I don't know how much I can say, but it's, there's the average age of a tradie in Australia is 37. The average age of a bricklayer is 40. To construct a standard home, there's thousands of individual or the wall systems of different materials that are all subject to price rises and raw material increases sort of quarterly. In New South Wales and similar in the other states, building apprenticeships were down, last year or the year before. So it's that situation where, supply is low, demand is very high, so prices and supply can only go one way. That's just That's just general market economics. So it's just something has to change. And what I would say to you is that by automating construction, we are creating a whole new industry. And then finally we can get kids that don't want to be so hands-on nowadays and be a tradie potentially. The guys that want to do computer techs and software, we can drag them out of the classrooms or when they finish school, into an automated construction application.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Joining me now to unpack just how safe these 3D printed homes are and whether or not we can expect to see more being built across Australia in the near future is Professor at the University of New South Wales and Director of the Australian Research Council's Training Centre for Next Gen Artificial Manufacturing, Hank Haeusler. Hank, thanks for joining me on The Briefing. These homes have been built overseas and now they're being built in Australia. How reliable are they?
I think it's reliable and safe as the Australian standards are. You have to build within an Australian standard framework. So that means because you've got a new technology that you could ignore standards and compliance issues. In an international kind of context, 3D printed homes have been tested for earthquake areas. They've been tested for fireproofing and fire areas. It is a concrete house, effectively. From a technical and compliance standard reason, they do not differ to an Australian home. I would even say they're probably on a higher standard if well designed and executed.
Let's talk availability. You kind of have a head count of how many people and players are in this space in Australia. Where are we at now? How many people are 3D printing homes in Australia?
There are around 4 companies that I know of. These companies are a mixture between we are manufacturers that produce a 3D printer, or companies that produce and 3D print, or companies that only 3D print, that purchase the machine. Because locally and internationally, the number of companies that produce machines is rising. I assume there will be an increased number over the years that will purchase a 3D printer. So the market of companies that will offer you a 3D printed home will increase quite a lot over the years. If you look into other countries in the US, a local company there is producing whole suburbs. So not only one house, but several dozen houses on the road. So I think that the market will shift quite quickly because it's an established technology. It's not a new technology. So I think an Australian consumer would be able very, very shortly to go and build their own house in 3D printing.
Okay, so it's a bit of a watch this space kind of moment. Currently, though, what are some of the barriers to getting your homes 3D printed in Australia?
The main challenge is still that people don't really design for 3D printing. The design, like they would design a house for bricks or for timber, and then come in and say, oh, we want to 3D print it. And I think there are certain things you have to consider for 3D printing in order to make it a success. So there's a lack at the moment in training for the architecture profession. There's also a lack for builders and the coordination between the 3D printer and other trades that would come together. Architecture is a coordination and collaboration effort. It's a team sport. You've got many members in the team. So of course you have to involve the plumber, the electrician in a different way if you 3D print than in a conventional way, because the wall is a concrete wall at the end and it's very hard to put openings in there. So you have to plan it ahead. The companies that are involved in 3D printing are addressing these issues. They're aware of these issues, and you will see a near exponential uptake of the technology because of the digital nature of the technology.
What impacts do you think, though, the growth of this tech will have on the construction industry? Essentially, what I'm asking you is, should we be supporting more automation in this country?
I think we should support more automation in this country. If Australia wants to increase their productivity, and particularly the productivity in the Australian architecture, engineering, construction sector, the AEC sector, it is important to be more productive. We're having a labour shortage. At the same time, we have to build more homes. The Australian federal government have announced they want to build 1.2 million homes over the next few years. So I would argue we should not ignore 3D printing. New jobs need to be created and the industry needs to change. If you would think about any profession that we engage, your job would have been a different job 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Podcasts probably didn't even exist. So I don't think really your job as a journalist have changed, but the medium your experience and your work with is changing. So I think 3D printing is playing a part in there as well. And I think we should more embrace that than being scared of it.
Well, a very good point there. Lastly, I do want to ask you about the impacts this could have on the housing market. You've spoken there about some of the national targets that the federal government have in, rolling out more available housing across the country. Some have touted 3D printing as a solution to our housing and rental crisis. Do you think that's true?
The housing crisis is so severe that it would be foolish to ignore options that are on the market or on the table. So I don't think 3D printing is a silver bullet, but it definitely could assist amongst many other efforts as well. I think another important factor, of course, is in order to customize your house, in order to make something very, very bespoke, you need a production mechanism that allows for bespoke. With 3D printing, you've got flexibility. They will execute a straight wall or a round wall, for example. So I think the opportunity to customize is quite high for 3D printing. So you probably have more chance to get the house that you want for the budget you need through the 3D printing and the flexibility in the 3D print than you will see at the moment with prefabricated homes or builder homes that you can buy off the market.
Well, Hank, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
That was UNSW's Professor Hank Haeusler speaking with me there, and founder and CEO of Contour 3D, Nick Holden, before him. That is it for this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, though, we'd love to know how you feel about 3D printed homes in Australia. Be sure to leave us a comment if you're listening on Spotify, a review on Apple Podcasts, or get in touch with us at The Briefing Podcast on Instagram. And don't forget, we'll be back in your feeds this afternoon with a brand new episode, and Tara Cassidy and I will be back tomorrow morning for another dose of headlines and an interesting deep dive. I'm Chris Spyrou. Catch you next time.
Listener.